Happy day, everyone. So I've been really disturbed. I don't know if you guys recall, we're going to go into this. The last time I reported out about Alabama, and I said, in the midst of everyone focusing on the riverboat, we need to look a little deeper. Shalom, Blue. Shalom. And so this is the deeper that I was talking about, right? You have pictures about Bloody Sunday and all of these marches and things that took place during an era, but did that era stop? And all of the calls for civil rights intervention and enforcement and accountability is ongoing. It's just this cycle of stuff that's happening in Alabama that is really challenging me to question, where are the human rights folks now, right? Because these are human rights violations. I'm going to make that very clear before I end this show tonight. Let me know where you're chiming in from. Definitely want to hear from you about this issue. If you have family in Alabama, share this with them, because they need to understand that these are not isolated incidences, even though, they're different types of incidences. However, the strategies and the tactics are still the same. And we have to, at the end of this, really think about what are the human rights violations here and what are the types of enforcement mechanisms that can be utilized. I get that, certain national public institutions tasked with civil rights enforcement have continued to be called to come in, investigate, and intervene. But as you will see, by the time I'm done, those interventions have not changed. You can legislate all day, but you can't change hearts. Okay. So let's go here. I don't want to spend too much time pontificating. I do want you guys to understand what is happening in this just trail of devastation. Nefarious, too. Nefarious. I mean, once you finish understanding what the people, the good people over there, Black community over there in Alabama, have been subjected to, any person that believes in a universal declaration of human rights would be compelled to intervene and look into ways to help and do more. So let's go here. And give me a 1 in the chat.
Developing tonight, a newly filed lawsuit in federal court accuses the state of Alabama of denying parole to incarcerated people in order to use those inmates for free labor. According to the plaintiffs, it amounts to, quote, modern-day slavery. In the 126-page filing, the plaintiffs named several state agencies, but also some city governments, including Montgomery and Troy. The lawsuit claims the state, and by extension, cities and even private businesses, stand to gain financially from the labor of ADOC inmates. The plaintiffs say the 2023 alone, Alabama will use its inmate population to obtain an economic benefit of $450 million.
Since 2018, they have grown this forced labor system by replacing evidence-based parole decision-making with a highly discriminatory parole system that favors white people over Black people for release at a rate of 2 to 1. The suit we filed alleges this forced labor scheme violates the U.S. Constitution, the Alabama Constitution, and a host of federal laws.
Now, we've reached out to the state's parole board, the ADOC, and the governor's office for comment on the lawsuit. So far, we've received no comment.
So we have comments though, right? We don't need everyone else to
Making the day of so
let me
many people
stop
right
this
now.
one. Stop sharing. All right, hold on a second. So let me close that because it's playing in the background. And so again, I'm going to bring this back around, right? What they're claiming is that they were denied parole and the ability to utilize the system's processes to gain their freedom because the system saw them as an economic benefit to exploit, which is slavery. Okay. So, like I said, if y'all have family in Alabama, I want to go through this and I'm going to end on where all the human rights declares now, right? We need to be looking at the layers of enforcement that have already been a mechanism by which the people in Alabama have tried to gain intervention, find out what those entities have done and said, and why this is a problem that continues to persist. And I gotta let you know, like, I personally don't know of any family that I have in Alabama. I have traveled all across the nation, and Alabama is not somewhere that I've unfortunately I haven't been able to go there. But this has been on my mind since I seen this story because I know of the cases, the numerous amounts of human rights violations, and when I say that, I don't use it lightly. Let me take you back to the case that I'm talking about where human rights violations were found. All right. So here we are at the grist. Okay. And I'll drop this in the chat. I did an episode about this. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this because I have done an episode about this. Shalom, shalom. I see everyone in the chat. Thank you. And so I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but I do want you to research the UN's probe into Alabama and the civil rights violations that they found there. The Alabama Backyard Sewage and Parasitic Disease EPA opened a civil rights probe in Alabama. Okay. And so, as you can see right here, it said that sewage collecting in crudely dug trenches, failing septic tanks that send waste bubbling into backyards. These are some of the common sites across Alabama's Black Belt, a strip of 24 continuous counties blessed with deep, fertile soil, but plagued by inadequate wastewater infrastructure and the commensurate parasitic disease. It's a problem. Yeah, well, that sounds like a problem, and it doesn't sound like one that should be with all of this modernized structural, architectural, and technological advances. And we have this issue here, and on the last video where I shared this information, I asked for you guys to be reaching out to your cousins, auntie and uncle and them, big mama and pawpaw, and find out who in the family has a solution, an innovative mind that can bring forth a solution to this water issue, right? Because these people should not be having to suffer. And when I'm talking about suffering, I'm not just talking about a little bit. I'm talking about the fact that the diseases found in their soil and were in their living conditions were so I mean, it was just disgusting that children were getting hookworm. Children's brains were affected. Okay. And so the UN went over there. And so here you see the EPA. This was in, let's go back. This was in published in 2023. I talked about this, right? And it says right here, advocates allege the state hindered Black residents from receiving critical federal funds. Sounds like they're just corrupt over there, huh? Now, this is a picture that was taken from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That's another federal entity tasked with enforcement. Okay, the EPA, USDA, right? And they all have civil rights offices in them, OCR, offices for civil rights. Okay, and so the opened the probe. However, what I noted is that in 2017, 2011, actually. Here we go. I found reports from 2011 and 2017. Let's share this tab instead. Okay, y'all bear with me because I want to bring this information in a way that shows these are not isolated incidents. There is a problem, and a new tide needs to roll in to Alabama. Okay, and so here you see the UN report on the human right to safe drinking water and sanitation. All right. And they sent an ambassador to Alabama to go check on these conditions that I just showed you and that I talked about in a whole nother video. Look it up. And here's the summary: mission to the United States. Now, we got a whole bunch of missionaries here. Why aren't they dealing with this problem? If they are claiming to promote and protect all of human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development, and these people can't even get their water situation fixed, purposely so. Funds were withheld and infrastructure was stifled in this particular area because this is the place where most Black people were relegated to live. Then why aren't those human rights folks speaking up about this? We got babies being born with hookworm. That's what the UN report said. I read through it. Okay. The summary presents findings and recommendations of the independent expert on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation from her country visit to the United States of America from 2022, February to March 2011, March 4th. Okay. In the report, the independent expert begins by outlining the international and domestic legal framework on the rights of water to water and sanitation. She then makes a general assessment of the enjoyment of the rights to water and sanitation in the United States of America. We talking about clean water, y'all. The U.S. has no business, I'm going to say this with all the fortitude that I can, telling other people how to conduct their water and sanitation business when it can't even fix the issue in Alabama. This 2011, that means that was when the UN came. That wasn't when it started. Okay. So how long has the Alabamans been trying to get a national lens and focus on this problem, on their human rights violations? Okay. Because I will tell you from dealing with various types of cases and violations and different things like that, it is not the first step for people who have been violated to immediately go all the way to the top. Now, I don't know what other entity you can appeal to outside of the United States beside the UN. I don't know if there's another enforcement and accountability and we're going to talk about the declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because it is non-legally binding, and you guys need to understand what that means. Okay. And so we're going to walk this through. So if you look at this in the report, there were outlines and recommendations made about the water condition, and then you have the EPA in October stating that there is an obvious problem. Now, wait a minute. You're talking about from 2011 when the UN comes and writes up that there is a condition in Alabama's water situation that is the worst that they've ever seen in a first world country. I'm going to let that rest for a minute. The United Nations has an ambassador who goes to Alabama, and they write a report that is a part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights section where they're protecting and promoting the protection of all human, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development, and it could particularly talking about drinking water and sanitation. Anybody that visits Global Goals will know that's one of their, universally declared goals, right? And they tell the government, who is publicly funded by taxpayers like you and me, that there is a serious issue in Alabama. Okay, in Alabama. And that issue in 2011 was documented, and the EPA gets called back in for the same issue cited from the UN in 2011. It takes them 12 years, y'all. I agree with you. There ain't no basketball players, actors, or musicians affected by this. These are the type of things that we have to deal with. Somebody do. Listen, let me say this. I've been providing this information about the condition of people, Black people in Alabama, for a period of time. And my role from California is that I'm sharing it. I'm looking at the longevity of these issues. If I knew how to fix if I knew how to innovatively and scientifically create a solution, I would do that. I would think about it until I could, right? I see all of these other, types of things being created and developed around cars that drive remotely, and it causes me to have righteously indignant frustration, right? The Alabamans have tried on several times to secure enforcement and intervention. We're the human rights people on this. I think that we should. Thank you. Thank you for that. You know we would, sister. Let me know if there is something you can do. Something that you can do is to tell people and warn them about the conditions of, first of all, the drinking water and sanitation in this particular area of the Black Belt, because the babies are being born with conditions that you usually don't see in a first world country. The UN said that. And it's messing with their brains, because that's what hookworm does, right? And so let's go to, if all we can do is share this information, and I'm really contemplating, what does it look like for us who don't live in Alabama to ask for the enforcement agencies, and then we can talk about this, right, to do their job. You do it everywhere else. Set a model in Alabama. How about that? I'm tired of looking at pictures of the past where our people, were being ravaged and attacked by water hoses and dogs and all of this, but you got this same consistent wickedness in Alabama. Okay. So here we're going to go to the NPR. We're going to go to the NPR. This is a human rights issue. Where are the so-called church leaders on this? Okay, this is a human rights violation. And if it's a non-legally binding thing, we're talking about human rights. I want to know, how long is Alabama going to have to fight this fight? You got the prisoners getting advocates, okay? And so here you have right here, prisoners, and this is what the NPR, you can look this up, read it at the same time, fact check. I want you to, because that's how I roll. Prisoners are suing Alabama over forced labor, calling it a form of slavery. Well, it is. We've been having this dialogue about the loophole in the Constitution and 13th Amendment that allows for servitude, involuntary servitude, in the case of a crime, right? So we've been talking about this for a long time. And look, I'm not here to advocate for the Constitution, but I am here to advocate for human life, for our brothers and sisters suffering in Alabama, right? And whatever mechanism that has to be utilized to do that needs to happen quickly. A new tide needs to roll on in to Alabama. Okay. And so here you see the prisoners suing, and let's go a little bit deeper into this. Let's look a little bit deeper into this. So let's see. As you saw in the video, a group of current and former Alabama prisoners are alleging that the state's prison labor practices amount to modern day slavery, a form or a modern day form of slavery. Let me get it straight. According to a complaint filed in federal court this week, the plaintiffs include 10 men and women who worked during their time in Alabama's prisons and say they were trapped in a system in which incarcerated people are forced to work, often for little or no money, for the benefit of the numerous government entities and private businesses. It looks like they have a whole form of economic exploitation going on by forced labor with the denial of people's right to freedom, which is slavery. Okay. We're not going to call this modern day. No, we're going to call it slavery. Okay. That's what it is. Okay. They weren't able to secure their freedom. The lawsuit also alleges that the conditions in the state's prison system itself are inhumane and render any work there inherently coercive. Now, I saw this before when the prisoners were protesting and they were brutalized for it. Look this information up, you guys. And they have been maintaining that the conditions by which they have to live and work in are inhumane and coercive. And that every time that they begin to ask for help, they are brutalized. And I believe them. Okay. I believe this. This is a history and a pattern of mistreatment coming out of Alabama. In 2022, the Department of Justice sued the state. Okay, it's 2024 almost, y'all. What's going on? I showed you the other situation of people on the outside living in unsanitary conditions and sewage, and the babies getting hookworms, and the UN writes a report. And 2011, the UN ambassadors say that this is the worst condition in the Black Belt in any first. You know how they try to level countries, right? And that in America, this is happening in the first world country, to people that are living there and have been relegated to that community and have no means of accessing what they need to fix the infrastructure. Now, I will tell you that when you look that case up, you'll find that the U.S. government gave Alabama millions of dollars to fix the situation. The federal government did. And the government in Alabama took that money and corruptly allocated the resources and denied access to those people who are living in those infrastructurally, doomed locations with sanitary and water conditions, access to the funding. They created mechanisms and modes, ways of applying that would automatically deny them the benefit from accessing the resources. Millions of dollars, y'all, where the problem could have been fixed prior to 2011. Okay, there's some corruption here. And we need to expose that because people are dying and suffering and being enslaved right here in the United States of America. So we ain't got no business telling other people what to do with their rights and human rights and all of these declarations. Okay. And so now you have, again, the prisoners crying out for help. This lawsuit in 2022. So let me take you to the actual document here. Okay. As you can see right here, and you can tell I'm really upset about this because this is ongoing and I'm trying to rack in my mind, what do we do to help the Alabamans, right? Justice Department filed the lawsuit against the state of Alabama for unconstitutional conditions in the state's prisons for men. Okay, so 2020 You see that December of 2020. Here is an official website. I'm not making this stuff up. Okay. Happening right to your neighbors. Okay. Today, and this was in 2020, speaking of today, the Justice Department filed suit against the state of Alabama and the Alabama Department of Corrections. The complaint alleges that the conditions at Alabama, at the prisons, for men violate the Constitution because Alabama fails to provide adequate protection from prisoner on prisoner violence, prisoner on prisoner sexual abuse, fails to provide safe and sanitary conditions, and subjects prisoners to excessive force at the hands of prison staff. There you have it. Now, the United States Constitution, we got a document, y'all, and enforcement agencies. These are 3 that I just showed you so far. 3 of them, except, well, you know what? Let me just say that the UN, unless it has a treaty, doesn't have any ability to enforce. So we have all of these entities involved: EPA, UN, DOJ, and y'all can't fix this issue. I mean, I want to know how many federal publicly funded, I'm trying to watch my words, institution does it require to uphold the Constitution and the human rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Last time I checked, the United States was an active member. Okay. And so you have right here the document from the DOJ. You can look this up. You see the title, right? And so they say here that the DOJ is committed to ensuring that all citizens' constitutional rights are respected. Well, why are we still having this conversation? And if that is the case, then why are they still suffering? Right? We got to look at words and actions. We have to look at what is really happening versus what is being said. We really need to have analytical ability to hone in on what is being said versus what is actually happening, right? Because they're not matching up. If there was a commitment in 2011, which, the government kind of nodded at the UN and said, okay, we recognize there's some issues here, if there was an issue, and there was in 2011, that gave 12 years to fix that. Okay. Gave 12 years. However, as we saw in October, it was still being brought up. You see the date down there. USDA, that's the entity that I was thinking of. So we had USDA chiming in, the UN chiming in, EPA chiming in, and they're still dealing with this problem. Okay. Now, here we have right here, the DOJ chimed in. The prisoners themselves have been, asking for their constitutional rights to be protected as they are forced into labor and practices that are corrupt. And this has been happening over time. And y'all want to talk about a riverboat? Just pause and think about that. We got more issues than people knocking people out at the river, y'all. Okay. That chair made it across the internet faster than the truth about these situations, these terms and conditions by which Black folks had to live by. So right now we're talking about, see, and I see you. The prisoners in Alabama once again are forced into labor and denied probation and parole. I'm sorry, they're denied their opportunities to parole in a corrupt manner because the private businesses and the prison want to keep them as part of forced labor. Now, I saw other breakdowns of this, and on those other breakdowns of what was happening to the prisoners, but I haven't been able to find proof of this. It was said that many of these prisoners were forced to work for the fast food industry and without pay. I do know with this particular lawsuit about slavery that was just filed, all of the people that are listed in the lawsuit are Black. Okay. And so we have a situation where it's not new. It's not new. I was also talking about the fact that in 2011, the UN went over to Alabama and said that the conditions of water and sanitation were the worst that they've ever seen in a first world country. And they told the United States in 2011 to fix it through this document right here, because this is the area in the Black Belt where mostly Black people were relegated to live. Okay. The situation from 2011 is continuing, because here you have a report from the EPA and USDA pictures in October of this year. How many years does it take for them to fix this? Children, babies are being born with hookworm, where they're not even able to fix the problem. So they've harmed literally generations. Okay. So now we're going back to the fact that, since I was asked the question, what's going on, I want to reiterate that the DOJ in 2020 looked into and filed a lawsuit about the unconstitutional conditions in states' prisons for men. Now, this is an immediate release for the Office of Public Affairs. This is public information, y'all. But unless you're looking for it or know what's going on, a lot of this information isn't going to be shared, right? Or it's posted in a place that's in the corner of a building, just saying. Okay. So I want you to look at this. This is what I'm saying. They're saying the same thing that I'm saying, which is the lawsuit is a result of a multi-year, okay, investigation into allegations of constitutional violations. So how many public agencies, federal entities, does it take for them to fix these problems, right? Within Alabama's prison for men was conducted by the Department's Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney offices for the Northern, Middle, and Southern districts of Alabama. Okay, just letting y'all know. This isn't something that is a small thing here. We have a history and a pattern of practice towards Black folks that we know continues to permeate throughout this nation. But in Alabama in particular, I want to know, where are the human rights advocates? The people that tout themselves as caring about life, liberty, and the pursuit of whatever they dream of, right? I'm just going to call it that. Where y'all at? I want to know, because this is definitely a human rights violation issue. The UN declared it, whether you like them or not. At least they got that information right. And that's public information that you can look at the medical reports and documentation on the water and sanitation conditions. And now you have the DOJ. Y'all like trusting the DOJ's information. You don't, do what you do. Where they've been looking at this multi-year investigation into the allegations of constitutional violations. And then you have the people of Alabama themselves, the prisoners, who have been saying for a long time, because I've watched these periodic, things peep up and rear their ugly head. All this stuff happens behind closed doors and then spills out into the streets, and somebody is forced to report on it. That's how this happens. They like to brush their dirt under the rug, right? And so I wanted to talk about this because, as you can see, all of these institutions and entities and, government enforcement agencies have been involved, but we don't really see a real solution. Okay. So if for over 20 months, the department has engaged in negotiations with the state without achieving a settlement that would correct the deficiencies identified by the department's investigation. Now, this was reported in 2020. Like, obviously the state is saying they're not willing to negotiate. They got their system, and whatever they want to do, that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. Okay. They don't have time to be talking to the DOJ about settling any of this. That's my interpretation. Okay. So then the lawsuit comes, which seeks injunctive relief to address deficient conditions identified by the department's investigation. The complaint contains allegations of unconstitutional conditions of confinement, which must be proven in federal court. The lawsuit does not seek monetary damages, but I think these people are should receive, yes, the injunctive relief and the restitution compensation, because they're paying for their crime, are they not? And they are serving their time in a suffering and severe way that to me looks inhumane. They're saying it's inhumane. They've shown improve. The DOJ is coming in and saying, hey, for over 20 months, the department has engaged in negotiations with the state, but we weren't able to achieve a settlement. So, we're going to go seek some injunctive relief, and they have the ability to enforce that way, right? And so, you could see the information. For those of you that want to reach out, you see the information. I say, look, if you have relevant information, you're encouraged to contact the department. Fine. This was posted in 2020. It's ongoing. It's not something that we're just, making up. You see right here the article. Now, I want to talk to you guys about, okay? I want to talk to you guys about not just this, but your thoughts about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay, because this is the kind of thought it sparks into me. And when people say that they believe in human rights, the right to all of these things, how are they backing it up by their actions? Okay, how are they backing it up? And when we have public governance structures tasked with protecting the people, where is our equal protection? So I'm going to keep asking that, right? This case of Alabama, what's happening there is a clear depiction of the human rights, civil rights, and constitutional rights violations that continue to persist. Okay. This is not an isolated incident. In one day, somebody just decided we're just going to come to Alabama and infiltrate the government and we're going to enslave Black folks. No, this is an age-old problem from the very establishment of the United States. And if the UN, EPA, USDA, DOJ, and everybody else that has a division tasked with enforcement is not able to get the state to equally protect Black people in Alabama, then there's a problem. It's been a problem for them. I can only imagine. Right? How they're living, what their freedoms are like, what kind of fear you're in when the prison system openly exploits for private and public gain, right? If I'm a person that's not imprisoned, I'm going to be concerned about becoming imprisoned, because then I know my opportunity to, seek parole, right, is going to be hindered, because you want to keep me in prison so that you can continue to economically exploit me, my labor. And then what is the threshold? What do the courts look like there? Right? Like, are people still being brought up on vagrancy like crimes and having maximum sentencing thrown the book at them, right? And so I want to look at, because I don't want to go too far into that, or I can get on something else. I want to look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But I just want to reiterate what it says. Now, like I said, this is a non-legally binding thing. Okay. It's non-legally binding. So for those of you that think the UN got, power outside of its treaties, through its Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and you're quoting them as a guarantee that you have, please think again. Okay. Let's just be clear about that. All right. And so let's go right here, to share it. But I do want to talk to you about the guidance set forth in these types of rights. Okay. So let's go right here. Right here, you see at the UN. So this is their official website and their stated rights. Okay, their declaration. They declared it, not me. Christina didn't declare this, right? This was something that they declared. All right. And so the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a milestone document in the history of human rights drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world. Now, if you understand the context, well, let me go a little bit further. The declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on December 10th of 1948. Y'all know that year sparks a lot of controversy. Okay. General Assembly Resolution 217A. So if you were to click on this, it's going to take you, this right here, to the actual document that they just referenced. As a common standard, listen to the language there, a common standard, that means guidance of achievements for all peoples and all nations. That means a framework, right? So basically, you have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a framework, okay, a common practice for all peoples and all nations. Just want to clarify that. It sets out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected, and it has been translated into over 500 languages. The UDHR is widely recognized as having inspired and paved the way for the adoption of more than 70 human rights treaties, applied today on a permanent basis at global and regional levels. So we're going to go over this, and I want to challenge you before we leave after looking at these articles. So here's the preamble, and I'm going to read the preamble, but I want you guys, this is my challenge. After you're done, I want you guys to go and look at the framework by which was declared from the UN about the way that people should be treated, and about the way that they should be able to have freedoms and protections, right? So let's go through the preamble. Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts, that's what we see in Alabama, which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. Okay, well, the Alabamans want this right now, right? Whereas it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Y'all see that, right? Okay, so people have a right to protect themselves against tyranny and oppression. Anyway, whereas it is essential to promote the development of friendly relations between nations. Okay, so they believe in promoting friendly relations between nations. And look, this again is not my declaration, it's theirs. Okay, whereas the people of the United Nations have the charter, in the charter, reaffirm their faith and fundamental human rights. That means that you're born free, you should die free. Okay. That means that these are rights that, yeah, so they say. That's why I said these are not my shalom, bro. These are not my declarations. These are their declarations. So why are these things not being afforded to the people in Alabama? And if you are just chiming in, please go back and look at what I'm talking about. These cases in Alabama that prove massive and ongoing human rights, civil rights, and constitutional rights violations, and all of the entities that they've tried to get involved. The UN went in even in, like I said, in 2011, declared in a document to the US what was going on there. The DOJ, the EPA, USDA. I don't really know how many entities it takes to secure the human and so-called constitutional rights that everyone is supposed to equally enjoy, and the civil rights of the people in Alabama, the black people in Alabama. But you guys want to talk about riverboat fights. And I'm not running a guilt trip. I'm talking about priorities here, right? And so here we are, whereas the member states, oh, this one, whereas the peoples of the United Nations have in the charter reaffirmed their faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in the equal rights of men and women, and have determined to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Whereas member states have pledged, the U.S. is a member state to the UN. Okay. They had an ambassador here in 2011 in the Black Belt talking about the unsanitary water conditions. I can't repeat this enough. I did a whole show about this. Go back and look at it. Whereas member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the United Nations, the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. And whereas a common understanding of these rights and freedoms is of the greatest importance for the full realization of this pledge. Now, therefore, let me scroll down a little bit. Now, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard. Like I said, these are non-legally binding. If the UN has treaties with certain countries, then those are documents that have more force to them as legally binding. This declaration, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is not legally binding. What are you talking about, Christina? It's not legally binding, right? What are you talking about? We see that there are all these articles, right, stating that we have the right to as human beings. But you mean to tell me that there is no enforceability or protection? This is a standard? Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. It's not legally binding. You can't go to the US and say, hey, you're a member state of the UN, and you guys agreed to this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I feel like you're violating Article 1 of that declaration. Who's going to enforce that, right? Is that going to be enforceable in courts? Where is the tribunal at the UN? Well, there is one. There is one. And if you guys like, I can go more into this governance structure and the way that these documents work at the UN. But I wanted to bring it up for a particular reason, right? And so if this was supposed to be a framework, call it guidance, call it, an agreement between nations to set a standard, this being a standard for the way that humans are supposed to be able to have rights, then why, when we look down the list, and we can just talk about Alabama looking at the list, right? These are not the standards set for some people. So where are the human rights advocates to make a declaration to Alabama for Black folks? See, there I go again, caring about what matters to me, right? And who is a reflection of me, right? And how I feel about babies being brought up in unsanitary conditions and in water and infrastructural issues and having hookworm. That's a generational issue there, right? And so if we look at number 5, and then I'm going to close. You guys let me know your thoughts. If you want me to cover this article and other things that, are connected to this Universal Declaration of Human Rights and how they form other documents and what that means, if it's a treaty or if it's a constitutional law, then I can go into that. I just don't want to, go into that today because I'd rather spend time advocating for the protection, safety, and well-being of the Black folks in Alabama who have been subjected to ongoing conditions that are not conducive for life. Nobody wants to live that way. And a lot of it goes back to corruption. Okay. So we're going to deal with this matter today. And I hope that you guys share this out and do your own research. I don't have the final say on this. I have a perspective on this. And I want you to go and research and tell your family members, whoever you have that is connected to a person in Alabama, because like I said, I'm in California, they're in Alabama, but I care enough about our overall condition to come and say, I'm going to spend my time trying to advocate about the situation, even if I have to do it as social media advocacy. And the rest of you guys can pick it up too, right? Because something needs to change. A new tide needs to roll in to Alabama. And so, as you can see right here, that no one shall be subjected in Article 5 to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. So, what do you call what is happening to the prisoners over there in Alabama? Right? So, I want to know, where are the enforcement agencies right here in the US, while the US is going out and telling everyone else how to live in their nations? Why can't they deal with the issue in Alabama that is a human rights, constitutional rights, and civil rights violation right here? What are they going to do? Okay. Unless they don't have the power that they claim. But if you don't have the power and your force of law is not applicable here, then why is it going to work in other places? This is the hypocrisy that continues to make me indignant, right? Stop telling other people, even in your daily life, this is a practice. Don't tell other people what to do if it's something you're not even willing to do yourself. You're not even willing to deal with the issue of the prisoners in Alabama. And I see your quote, Yaquaba. This is what I was saying. The prisoners are themselves saying what's happening to them, and I believe them. A prisoner wrote me long a time ago that the prison was infested with bugs and it was unsanitary. Yeah. And so this document right here agrees. The Department of Justice. Now, have they been faking power? Because they can't enter into a settlement with the state. Now, this is why I said that it takes more than one side to uphold and maintain the structure of racism, of unequal protections within the law. We don't have equal protections here, right? Because I could think if this shoe was on the other foot, stuff would have been done. If the UN came to a predominantly white community and said, this is unsanitary, this is the worst thing we've ever seen in a first world country, then I don't know, they can go to Appalachia or something, I don't know, and posted recommendations, and all of these things were in the news, the AP, the NPR, and all of these things are posted, that issue would have been solved. That water situation, okay? So let's talk real today. This is not, let's fake and pretend and tiptoe around the tulips with each other, because if y'all know me, you know I don't like to meet again. And this is greater than a riverboat or a Bloody Sunday March on Selma issue. A new tide needs to roll in, okay? And so I'm going to challenge you to go and look at the articles and see where they align with our Constitution. And what does that mean for you? But I can tell you this is guidance and it's non-legally binding outside of a treaty. The U.S. is a member state, and there were other things that were happening historically, right, within the context of the formation of the UN. There are people that oppose the formation and establishment and articles and constitution and all of these other things in the UN. And you need to look at both sides of the argument to come up and with your own perspective and understand the truth. I don't have time to do that right now, but that's something that I'm challenging you to do. I am also challenging you to share this information with people that are willing to act. We don't need people like, right? I from California have the ability to come and share this information so that the story does not get tucked under the rug, and to advocate and to break down what is happening. I'm asking you to do the same thing. I've given you several incidences that show it's not an isolated incident. So we're not just talking about prisoners. We're talking about unsanitary water conditions where babies are born and have to be born and have hookworm and other diseases that are listed in that 2011 UN document, right? We're talking about the DOJ's report that after 20 months of attempted negotiations, no settlement could be reached. And so, therefore, they're seeking injunctive relief in the courts. It's not monetary. We're talking about the EPA and USDA's reporting about the unsanitary conditions, which were caused by misappropriation and corruption of public tax dollars, because the federal government sent millions of dollars that would have fixed the problem way back in the early 2000s. And the government, corrupt and nefarious, denied the Black people in that community with unsanitary water conditions the right to access those funds. So they had their opportunity to fix the infrastructure and didn't. Now that's wicked. Okay. So, thank you for watching. I want you to do more than watch. I want you to walk away and commit to an action. What does that look like? Well, look up this information, see what is most triggering to you. Maybe it's the water situation, maybe it's the prisoner situation, and commit to an action. Share this information with as many people. I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm a little distracted by it. I have my personal heater right here at my desk. Share this information with as many people as you know will act. We don't need people that are going to keep talking. And if you guys want me to show you what it looks like to launch other types of actions, I don't have a problem sitting here in coalition with anyone that's willing, a coalition of the willing, to say we are committed to our collective uprise. And this is a human rights violation, a civil rights violation, a constitutional violation, and just outright wicked as hell. So with that, people, I'm going to let y'all go. Shalom and have a good night.